Hello everybody. We are going to go through Evelyn Underhill's book called Mysticism, studying the nature and development of the spiritual path. And I'm going to be out here while it's still sunny. Oh, I'm going that way. And I just wanted to start this video while the sun was out and I didn't take off my roller skates yet. Alright, but I have the book and we're gonna pick up where we left off. For as long as it's light, I'll see if we can get some of the ocean. I'll show you the ocean. There's kind of a big sand barrier between it because I already started walking back. I'm gonna just stop here, I think. All right, so welcome. Evelyn Underhill wrote this book in 1910 or 11, published in 1911. It was, it inspired C.S. Lewis and I'm sure Tolkien and Charles Williams, who was a part of the Inklings. You can read about it in the description and I also gave you a link so you can read it. But I didn't find it anywhere. I like listening to books on audio, so I decided to record it for us. Hopefully the wind's not playing too much in my microphone. Oh, my friend is skating over there. He's so good. He just did like a twirl. Okay, so this gets really deep, but I like doing it at a beautiful place because we're talking about mystic things. And so whenever I happen to be at one, it's always when I want to leave for dinner. But some things are more important than dinner, right? So let's get into this. I'll let you can hear the crash of the ocean just behind me. I wish the camera would show what I'm seeing. You will just see the palm trees. Oh, I do have a light. I thought I didn't have a light, but I have a ring light in the car because my other light broke. Okay. So just don't mind the technicality part. Let's start. I might just set the phone down. Sometimes I do that. I'm trying to get a good view for you. It's pretty static. Sometimes I'm up at the hiking trail where it's really dynamic. All right. All mystics, says Saint Martin, speak the same language, for they come from the same country. The deep underlying life which nests within us came from that country too, and it recognizes the accents of home, though it cannot always understand what they would say. I did forget to say, I forgot to say I'm a psychologist in my day job, and I've been one for over 20 years. So sometimes, like the last chapter was on psychology, and so the psychology of mysticism. So I will sometimes bring up stuff if it can help. If it doesn't, then I just continue to read. But anyway, now returning to our original undertaking, that of defining, if we can, the characteristics of true mysticism, I think that we have already reached a point at which William James celebrated 4 marks of the mystic state: ineffability, noetic quality, transiency, and passivity will fail to satisfy us. But those are something. That's a lot. Ineffability, noetic quality, transiency, and passivity will fail to satisfy us. In their place, I propose to set out, illustrate, and I hope justify 4 other rules or notes which may be applied as tests to any given case which claims to take rank amongst the mystics. True mysticism is active. Okay, so here's the first one. True mysticism is active and practical, not passive and theoretical. It is an organic life process, a something which the whole self does, not something as to which its intellect holds an opinion. So it's like you are experiencing, tasting a strawberry, not just talking about it or just your head is having experience. your whole body in a way is having the experience. Ah, look at that. Two, its aims are wholly transcendental and spiritual. It is in no way concerned with adding to, exploring, rearranging, or improving anything in the visible universe. The mystic brushes aside that universe, even in its most supernormal manifestations. Though he does not, as his enemies declare, neglect his duty to the many, his heart is always set upon the changeless One, with a capital O. The One, we come from the One. Like I wear this, let's get it real quick. So it's a picture of it, you know? It's like our head can be up in the heavens, our feet down on the earth. We have this relationship horizontally, but always remember to come back to the oneness, right? This is like a symbol of that. The balance comes in returning to the oneness. That's where we came from, the oneness. So number 2 here is its aims are wholly transcendental and spiritual. It is in no way concerned with adding to, exploring, rearranging. Okay, we said that. It goes back to the One. The mystic, I'll read that one sentence over again. There's 2 sentences. The mystic brushes aside that universe, even in its most supernormal manifestations. Though he does not, as his enemies declare, neglect his duty to the many. His heart is always set upon the changeless One. Okay, number 3, this One is, for the mystic, not merely the reality with a capital R of all that is, but also a living and personal object of love, never an object of exploration. It draws his whole being homeward, but always under the guidance of the heart. Uh-oh. I don't know what to do. Hold on. I have to close my ear off to that because then I'll get dinged for having copyright music. But it's a great song. Wow, if I can look that up later. Anyway. So 3. This One is for the mystic, not merely the reality of all that is, but also a living and personal object of love, never an object of exploration. It draws his whole being homeward, but always under the guidance of the heart, right? That's the other necklace I wear. And that's one other thing I was going to say, I'm thinking maybe my intuition is calling me to it, is, always drop down from your head into your heart, right? And so, I had this whole playlist called Home Longing Songs. They're all songs about longing for home. And that home is the divine love, is God, is the oneness from which we all came. That G.K. Chesterton even says, like, every man in a brothel is looking for God, right? Anyway, number 4, so she has 1, 2, 3, and 4, is living union with this One, which is the term of his adventure, is a definite state of form of enhanced life. It is obtained neither from an intellectual realization of its delights, nor from the most acute emotional longings. Though these must be present, they are not enough. It's not about just the longing. C.S. Lewis said, who corresponded with Evelyn Underhill, she told him his idea of God was not wild enough, right? And then he came up with Aslan later. But he wrote, I can't remember what I was going to say about what he said. He wrote that our longings are not too strong, but too weak. We're like kids fooling around with, but that's not the one I was going to say. He's like, we're far too easily pleased. Oh, I know what I was going to quote is he was saying that when you go to the song, when you go to that moment you had with someone or whatever, you trace back, you go listen to that song again. It wasn't in the song. It just came through the song. It came through the person, that beauty, that love. I forgot the word. I had to say the word in German, but it's Sehnsucht is how it's sort of spelled. And it's saudade in Portuguese. It's like this nostalgic longing for the oneness, for this anyway. But it says, though these longings must be present, they are not enough. It is arrived at by a definite and arduous psychological process. This so-called mystic way, entailing the complete remaking of character and the liberation of a new or rather latent form of consciousness, which imposes on the self the condition which it sometimes inaccurately called ecstasy, but it is better named the unitive state. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna get the light because I'm starting to not see, but so some of you just want the book can fast forward a little if you want, but I invite you to stay here because I'm going to talk for a second while I skate back to the car and get the light, because I forgot that I brought it today. I was just thinking if I had any. Is the unitive state, okay, in I don't know if that's Zen Buddhism or whatever, it's called the samadhi. It's called all sorts of different things, but when you get in this place, which I pretty much just got to while I was watching with this kid, one of my friends brought her niece, and we were watching the sunset just now skating, and it was just, you could tell. It's just like in The Sound of Music when they're like, can we have a picnic every day? Because they'd never been that relaxed and at ease and, enjoy. That's what we are. It's our state of being in our innermost self, when you can be at peace and not caught up in your mind and the things of this world. I might just stay in the car. It's so pretty out here. All right, by the time you guys get this, I'll have already made like 2 more of these videos, but if you want to vote, write down if you like me staying outside or if it doesn't matter if I'm in my car. I like you having a dynamic background. But it's nice and cozy in my car, and we don't have any interruptions. Okay. All right, let me go back to the book for a while, and if we have another break, I'll figure out if I'm gonna go out with the light. We can't really see anything. Just know that you're by the ocean. It's such an expansive feeling. I wish I had you guys over by where I just was. I was right over by the ocean. Just keep this on. Okay. Okay, so some people inaccurately just call it ecstasy, but it's far more than that. Mysticism, then, is not an opinion. It's not a philosophy. It has nothing in common with the pursuit of occult knowledge. Thank you, Evelyn Underhill, for explaining that to us. Because so many people, our egotism always says it's not enough, and always wants to go more. And so it ventures off sometime into the occult. And Anne Teresa of Avila said you don't need to go into the occult, right? It has nothing in common with the pursuit of occult knowledge. It is not merely the power of contemplating eternity. It's the name of that organic process which involves the perfect consummation of the love of God. John Butler talks about it in a book called Impromptu Number 2, The Jesus Prayer. It's so good. It's like if you could understand what he's saying, I was listening to it again today, you could get all of this. You could really get all of this. All right. There. It is the name of that organic process which involves the perfect consummation of the love of God, the achievement here and now of the immortal heritage of man. Or, if you like it better, for this means exactly the same thing, it is the art of establishing this conscious relation with the absolute. I'm going to read that sentence again, right? Because if we just had an understanding of that sentence, I think it could just change everything. Or, if you like it better, for this means exactly the same thing. It is the art of establishing his conscious relation with the absolute. Oftentimes when I pray the Our Father, I pray, Our Father who art in heaven. I just imagine God doing art in heaven, and we're joining in that art. This is the art of learning how to love and be one with the absolute beingness that is absolute love, right? The movement of mystic consciousness towards this consummation is not merely the sudden admission to an overwhelming vision of the truth. It is rather an ordered movement towards ever higher levels of reality, ever closer identification with the infinite. The mystic experience, says Reza Jacques, ends with the words, I live, yet not I, but God in me. This feeling of identification, which is the term of mystical activity, has a very important significance. In its early stages, the mystic consciousness feels the absolute in opposition to the self. Okay, remember this, right? Remember this. Don't be discouraged if you're in your early stages. It says, in its early stages, the mystic consciousness feels the absolute in opposition to the self. As mystic activity goes on, it tends to abolish this opposition. When it has reached its term, the consciousness finds itself possessed by the sense of a being at one and the same time greater than the self and identical with it, great enough to be God, intimate enough to be me. Wow. Excuse me. Let me grab this light. Okay. Excuse my arm. The other arm, I think, has a rose on it. No, this one has a rose. I love this rose, right? Rose reminds me, rise, open your soul eyes, and I have this rose as our bookmark. Anyway, that's what we're learning to do. This is the art of that, I have this poem that I can show this one on a rose that was in my garden. Oh, good. I can tell people where to get a screenshot of this, because I just read this on a different video I made today. Okay, so there. Whoa, that's bright. I wonder if I can put it here. Okay, sorry, it's like we're camping, but I want to just read. I really do. I just want to get into this book. Wow, that's bright, but that'll brighten up so I can read. Okay. I live, yet not I, but God in me. This feeling of identification, which is the term of mystical activity, has a very important significance. In its early stages, the mystic consciousness feels... I already read this. I know that. Sometimes it's so good to read this over, so don't worry if I'm reading the sentence over. It's worth it for us. I wish we could memorize this whole book. Don't be intimidated by it. Here it is. I got an old copy. Okay. All right. Anyway, I'll go past where we were now. This is the mystic union, which is the only possible fulfillment of mystic love, since, and here's a quote from like a poem, it looks like. All that is not one must ever suffer with the wound of the absence. And whoever is in love's city enters, finds but room for one, and but in oneness union. Wow. Wisdom of the East series by Jami, Jami. The history of mysticism is the history, you know what I'm thinking of too, is that when Jesus said, it is hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Back in Jerusalem, I've been there, there's a gate called the Camel's Gate. Let me see if I can push this. And in the Camel's Gate, right? It's called the Eye of the Needle Gate. It's called the Eye of the Needle Gate. And it's very small. And so in order to get through that gate, and it was all the way back in that time, it's more than 2,000 years old, this Eye of the Needle Gate. It's been there for forever. But in order to get in, the camels had to take all the stuff, all their packs off the camel and get through and then repack it all. That's the only way to get in through that gate. So it's like, were you going to go all the way around this part of Jerusalem to a different gate, or go through the Eye of the Needle Gate? It's kind of like that. Jesus was giving us a clue into higher consciousness. He always is. When he says, it's just exactly as the same as this poem. He says, when you're rich in your own mind and you think that you're holding on to riches, you don't want to let them go, but you got to let them go to get to the union. And then you have everything, because you're in union with the creator that created everything. So what are your riches compared to that? But, you decide. The history of mysticism is the history of the demonstration of this law upon the plane of reality. Now, how do these statements square with the practice of the great mystics, and with the various forms of activity which have been classified at one time or another as mystical? Mysticism is practical, not theoretical. This is number one here. And she wrote a book after this called Practical Mysticism. I can't wait to read that. I can't believe I haven't yet. Anyway, this statement, taken alone, is not, of course, enough to identify mysticism. She said, the number one I just read is, mysticism is practical and not theoretical. Okay, so this statement taken alone is not, of course, enough to identify mysticism, since it is equally true of magic, which also proposes to itself something to be done rather than something to be believed. It at once comes into collision, however, with the opinions of the groups of writers who believe mysticism to be the, quote, reaction of the born Platonist upon religion. Platonist, someone who follows Plato's teachings of the absolute and all the other things that Plato teaches. The difference between such devout philosophers and the true mystic is the difference which the late Father Tyrrell defined as separating theology from revelation. Mysticism, like revelation, is final and personal. It is not merely a beautiful and suggestive diagram of experience, but it is of the very stuff of life. In the superb words of Plotinus, it is the soul's solitary adventure, quote, the flight of the alone to the alone. I learned by someone alone is all one. You feel like you're really lonely on this path, but then you realize you're all one. You're one with everyone. You're one with everything. So you don't feel alone when you get in the mystic state, Its vision provides the material and the substance, the actual experience upon which mystical philosophy cogitates, as the theologians cogitate upon the individual revelations which form the basis of faith. Hence, those whom we are to accept as mystics must have received and acted upon intuitions of a truth which is for them absolute. If we are to acknowledge that they, quote, knew the doctrine, they must have, quote, lived the life, submitted to the interior travail of the mystic way, not merely have reasoned about the mystical experiences of others. We could not well dispense with our Christian Platonists and the mystical philosophers, they are our stepping stones to higher things, and interpret to our dull minds, entangled in the sense world, the ardent vision of those who speak to us from the dimension of reality. But they are no more mystics than the milestones on the Dover Road are travelers to Calais. Sometimes their words, the wistful words of those who know but cannot be, produce mystics. As the sudden sight of a signpost pointing to the sea will rouse the spirit of adventure in a boy, right? It's not jumping in the sea, but it's a signpost. And if you ever have it and jumped into the sea, you're like, yes. Even if you haven't, that sense of adventure can be awakened in you, right? Also, there are many instances of true mystics, such as Meister Eckhart, the German mystic, who have philosophized upon their own experiences greatly to the advantage of the world, and others, Plotinus, is the most characteristic example of Platonic philosophers who have passed far beyond the limits of their own philosophy and abandoned the making of diagrams for an experience, however imperfect, of the reality at which these diagrams hint. It were more accurate to reverse the epigram above stated and say that Platonism is a reaction of the born intellectualist upon mystical truth. Wow. Over and over again, the great mystics tell us not how they speculated, but how they acted. To them, the passage from life of sense to the life of spirit is a veritable undertaking which demands effort and constancy. The paradoxical quiet of the contemplative is but the outward stillness essential to the inward work. Their favorite symbols are those of action, battle, search, and pilgrimage. And here's another quote from like a poem or something. In an obscure night, fevered with love's anxiety, oh, hapless, happy plight, I went, none seeing me, forth from my house, where all things quiet be. Said St. John of the Cross. St. John of the Cross, he's so amazing. In his poem of the Mystic Quest, it became evident to me, says Al-Ghazali, of his own search for the mystic truth, that the Sufis are men of intuition and not men of words. I recognized that I had learnt all that can be learnt of Sufism by study, and that the rest could not be learnt by study or by speech. I love Rumi. I visited his grave in Turkey. He's such a beautiful soul. I actually had a mystical experience with Rumi at his grave, and I wasn't planning for it. I didn't at all know that was going to happen. I just came with gratitude and love, and it was just amazing. I won't go into it right here because some people would just think it's too weird to understand, but it was definitely not my own imagination. It was Rumi. Anyway, but he was a Sufi poet, and I love his writings. They've helped me through like the darkest of times. He, because you just know he gets it. He's had these experiences. Let no one suppose, says the Theological Germanica, that we may attain to this true light and perfect knowledge by hearsay or by reading and study, nor yet by high skill and great learning. It is not enough, says Gerlach Peterson, to know by estimation merely, but we must know by experience. So, I don't know how to pronounce her name, of Magdeburg, says of her revelations, quote, the writing of this book was seen, heard, and experienced in every limb. I see it with the eyes of my soul and hear it with the ears of my eternal spirit. I read that book of hers, but it said you need to read it like 9 times in order to get it. I think she said 6 or 7 or 9 times. I can't remember. But I wrote in the back of the book, okay, here's 1 time, and I wrote the date, But I read the whole one in the Revelations of Mathilde de Magdeburg. But one thing I'll do say so that you can not feel like you're out of it if you haven't had these, is I was on a trip, a long mystic trip, through Turkey, through Ephesus, where Mary went after the resurrection. And I was with a bunch of people that spoke German, and I did not speak German. And so I had to keep surrendering every day so I wouldn't get frustrated because I couldn't understand what anyone was saying, And so I was just in this constant state of surrender for that trip. And I didn't know we were going. I thought we had been going to Rumi's grave the day before, so I wrote a poem for him. And then we didn't. And then they're like, okay, we're here. And the next day. And so it's just, I recommend a constant state of surrender to divine love, to God. You can trust surrendering to God, not to man, to God. Anyway, the invitation of the mystic life is to come and see. The promise of the mystic life is that we shall attain to see. Those who suppose it to be merely a pleasing consciousness, because it feels very zen and peaceful to be in the oneness, when you feel connected to all. But okay, and so to those who suppose it to be merely a pleasing consciousness of the divine in the world, a sense of the otherness of things, a basking in the beams of the uncreated light, are only playing with reality. True mystical achievement is the most complete and most difficult expression of life, which is as yet possible to man. It is at once an act of love, an act of union, an act of supreme perception, a trinity of experiences which meets and satisfies the three activities of the self. I think what she's talking about, those acts, the acts of love, an act of union, an act of supreme perception, a trinity of the experiences which meets and satisfies the three activities of the self. Religion might give us the first and metaphysics, the third of these processes, right? Religion might give us this act of love, and metaphysics might give us this act of supreme perception, but only mysticism can offer the middle term of the series, the essential link which binds the three in one. Quote, secrets, says St. Catherine of Siena, are revealed to a friend who has become one thing with his friend and not to a servant. Oh, wow. She's quoting Jesus. Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, but friends, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. But Jesus is telling us, he tells us everything. He says, I tell you everything. It's not secret. It's not hidden and cut off from you. We have access to the Holy Spirit. It's weird when I look back up because I'm like, who is that? When I'm in this state, I'm in my essence, and it's weird to identify with myself as a person on the video. But anyway, mysticism is entirely, okay, so number 2 here. Mysticism is an entirely spiritual activity. This rule provides us with a further limitation, which of course excludes all the practicers of magic and of magical religion, even in their most exalted and least materialistic forms. So mysticism is an entirely spiritual activity. As we shall see when we come to consider these persons, their object, not necessarily an illegitimate one, is to improve and elucidate the visible by help of the invisible, to use the supernormal powers of the self for the increase of power, virtue, happiness, or knowledge. The mystic never turns back on himself in this way or tries to combine the advantages of two worlds. At the term of his development, he knows God by communion, and this direct intuition of the absolute kills all lesser cravings, right? It's like I wasn't looking for this mystic experience with Rumi, and I wasn't looking for it to change any part of my life. I was just present with it, and I was surprised by it. But anyway, he possesses God and needs nothing more. Though he will spend himself ceaselessly and tirelessly for other men, become an agent of the eternal goodness. He is destitute of supersensual ambitions, craves no occult knowledge or power. Having his eyes set on eternity, his consciousness steeped in it, he can well afford to tolerate the entanglements of time. Quote, his spirit, says Tauler, is as it were sunk and lost in the abyss of the deity, and loses the consciousness of all creature distinctions. All things are gathered together in one with the divine sweetness, and the man's being is so penetrated with the divine substance that he loses himself therein, as a drop of water is lost in a cask of strong wine. And thus the man's spirit is so sunk in God, in divine union, that he loses all sense of distinction. And there remain a secret, still union, without cloud or color. I wish not, said Catherine of Genoa, for anything that comes forth from thee, but only for thee, O sweetest love. The soul, says Plotinus, in one of his most profound passages, quote, having now arrived at the desired end, and participating of deity, will know that the supplier of true life is then present. She will likewise then require nothing further, for on the contrary, it will be requisite to lay aside other things, to stop in this alone, amputating everything else with which she is surrounded. If you knew that the divine was on the other side of the Jerusalem gate, it's like the temple was in Jerusalem and the Holy of Holies was in Jerusalem. And if the Ark of the Covenant was there and the mercy seat and God was abiding in it, you would take off everything off your camel to get through to that place. You would, and you wouldn't even care to put it back on. You wouldn't even care if it was on or if it wasn't. It is like that, Even Rumi, what I experienced with Rumi was only pointing to God. And he says in all his writings not to mistake the hand for the pointing, the thing that's pointing to the thing that it's pointing to, right? Like not to get stuck on the finger pointing to the moon. He says it like that, but anyway. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna, my light went out. I guess that's as much as the charge as it gets. Excuse me. Oh, it just went back on. That's strange. Yeah, I have a portable charger and other things, but all right, I'll just put it back for now. Until it goes out again, I guess. All right. Oh, that's it. Okay. If I got a normal setup, then these videos wouldn't be exciting, right? Some people are like, just read the book, but then you're not a mystic, right? I mean, maybe it would be good sometimes if I planned these, but I know that they'd never get made, so it just is what it is. Sometimes I say that to my kids, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. All right. The business and method of, okay, so alone, amputating everything else, yeah, with which she is surrounded, right? The business, and oh, Jesus said that. He said it. It's about amputating. So she doesn't speak off at all. He says, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If your eye causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better to enter into the castle, into the temple maimed, than to, enter, like not to enter at all, basically. And so, all right, so 3, the business of, I love this, the business and method of mysticism is love. I think this is the charger for this. Yeah, it is. That's good. All right, I have a portable charger. We'll see if we can attach this and that. Okay. All right. We're MacGyvering this. But it gives us light, so, and there was light. I hope my earbud is making you hear this. Otherwise, I'll have to edit this where I can add volume. The business and method of mysticism is love. Here is one of the most distinctive notes of true mysticism, a note which marks it off from every other kind of transcendental theory and practice, and provides the answer to the question which our last chapter closed. It is the eager, outgoing activity. Whose at least it's charging. Whose driving power is generous love, not the absorbent indrawing activity which strives only for new knowledge, that is fruitful in the spiritual as well as in the physical world. It is the eager, outgoing activity whose driving power is generous love, not the absorbent indrawing activity which strives only for new knowledge, that is fruitful in the spiritual as well as in the physical world. Having said this, however, we must add, as we did when speaking of the heart, that the word love, as applied to the mystic, is to be understood in its deepest, fullest sense, as the ultimate expression of the self's most vital tendencies, not as the superficial affection or emotion often dignified by this name. Mystical love is the offspring of the celestial Venus, the deep-seated desire and tendency of the soul towards its source. It is a condition of humble access, a life movement of the self, more direct in its methods, more valid in its results, even in the hands of the least lettered of its adepts, than the most piercing intellectual vision of the greatest philosophic mind. Over and over again, the mystics insist upon this. Quote, "For silence is not God, nor speaking is not God. Fasting is not God, nor eating is not God. Loneliness is not God, nor company is not God." Maybe it means loneliness. Maybe it got cut off. The L is not in this page, but nor yet any of all the other two such quantities. He is hid between them, and may not be found by any work of the soul, but all only by love of thine heart, right? He may not be known by reason, he may not be gotten by thought, nor concluded by understanding, but he may be loved and chosen with the true lovely will of thine heart. Such a blind shot with the sharp dart of longing love may never fail of the prick, the which is God. Oh, that's a quote from someone. This beautiful English tract, probably by the author of The Cloud of Unknowing, is printed by E. Gardner. Wow. Oh, wow. Okay, so if you read a book called The Cloud of Unknowing, talks about this. And so look, even on my heart, there's a little word at the bottom that says love, right? And so that's what I was in. I was in a state of surrendered love when I went to Rumi's grave. When I heard this one Bob Marley song and I was praying, I just felt this union with everything at a different time in my life. Oneness, like everything was one. Anyway, "Come down quickly," says the incomprehensible Godhead to the soul that has struggled, like Zacchaeus, to the topmost branches of the theological tree, "for I would dwell with you today." Right? Jesus said that to Zacchaeus. I was just studying that the other day. Come down from that tree. You know, he had this longing, love, or whatever, to see Jesus, and it said he welcomed him right away. He was so happy to welcome him, right? And the swift descent which God demands is simply an immersion by love and desire in that abyss of the Godhead, which the intellect cannot understand. Here, where the intelligence must rest without. It must rest outside, love and desire can enter in, right? He said afterwards, after Jesus just visited his house, he says, because he was a leader of the tax collectors, or leader of the publicans. He said, if I've taken anything from anyone, I'll pay them back 4 times or something like that. Or I can't remember what the times was. And I give away 1/3 of my possessions. I think that's what he did. I can't remember. Don't quote me on the numbers. I had the numbers memorized like last week, but then I forgot. 2 weeks ago. One might compile volumes of extracts from the works of the mystics illustrative of this rule, which is indeed its central principle, for, quote, love, says Roll, truly suffers not a loving soul to hide in itself, but ravishes it out to the lover, that the soul is more there where it loves than where the body is that lives and feels it. O singular joy of love everlasting, he says again, that ravishes all his to heavens above all worlds, them binding with bands of virtue. O dear charity in earth that has thee not, is not wrought. Okay, it's N-O-T and then N-O-U-G-H-T. I'm going to read it again. O dear charity in earth that has thee not, is not wrought, whatever it hath. He truly in thee is busy, to joy above earthly is soon lifted. O merry love, strong, ravishing, burning, willful, strong, unslacked, that all my soul brings to thy service and suffers to think on nothing but thee. O clear charity, and then it's ellipsis. O clear charity, come into me and take me into thee, and so present me before my Maker. Thou art a savor well-tasting, sweetness well-smelling, a pleasing odor, a cleansing heat, a comfort endlessly lasting. Thou makest men contemplative, heaven gate thou openest, mouths of accusers thou dost shut. God, thou makest to be seen, and multitude of sins thou hidest. We praise thee, we preach thee, by thee the world we quickly overcome, by whom we joy, and the heavenly ladder we ascend. Love to the mystics, then, is the active, conative expression of his will and desire for the absolute, and b, his innate tendency to that absolute, his spiritual weight. He is only thoroughly natural, thoroughly alive when he is obeying its voice. For him it is the source of joy, the secret of the universe, the vivifying principle of things. In the words of Rese Jacques, mysticism claims to be able to know the unknowable without any help from the dialectics, and believes that, by way of love and will, it reaches a point to which thought alone is unable to attain. Thought alone cannot get you here. Again, quote, it is the heart and never the reason which leads us to the absolute. Hence, St. Catherine of Siena's exquisite allegory, it is the feet of the soul's affection which brings it first to the bridge. Quote, for the feet carry the body as affection carries the soul. Page after page of the jewels of mystic literature glow with this intimate and impassioned love of the absolute, which transcends the dogmatic language in which it is clothed, and becomes applicable to mystics of every race and creed. There is little difference in this between the extremes of Eastern and Western thought, between Thomas A. Kempis, right, the Christian, and Jalaluddin, the Muslim saint. I wonder if that's a different name for Rumi that they used back in 1910. I want to look that up, but how great a thing, and you guys can always comment if you look that up for me, because I'm posting these videos and doing this work. You guys can do some side reconnaissance work, right? How great, Jelalu, Deden. I wonder if that would be so cool. How great a thing is love, great above all other goods, for alone it makes all that is very heavy light, and bears evenly all that is uneven. Love would be aloft, nor will it be kept back by any lower thing. Love would be free and estranged from all worldly affection, that its inward sight be not hindered, that it may not be entangled by any temporal comfort, nor succumb to any tribulation. Naught is sweeter than love, not stronger, not higher, not wider. There is no more joyous, fuller, better thing in heaven or earth. For love is born of God, and cannot rest save in God, above all created things. The lover flies, runs, and rejoices. He is free, and cannot be restrained. He gives all, for all, and has all in all, for he rests in one supreme above all, from whom all goods flow, all good flows, and proceeds. He looks not at the gift, but above all goods turns himself to the giver. This is like when you actually have real communion and you know and believe that that is really the body and blood of Christ in some way, even if your faith practice doesn't define it. It is, if it's consecrated, lifted up to him, and you're experiencing this experience every Sunday, which is the first day of the week, and the last day of the week, that this is God giving you all of himself, and you're giving all of yourself to God. Every week you can have that experience. Every time you go to Mass, if you go every day, you can have that experience. It's a mystical experience. But if you just pursue it like a religious thing, then, you're just pursuing something in your head, to try to get points or something, But if you just surrender into it, then you experience this state, and it's amazing. He looks not at the gift, but above all goods turns himself to the giver. He who loves knows the cry of this voice. Like Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice. But she said, for this burning affection of the soul is a loud cry in the ears of God, when it saith, quote, my God, my love, thou art all mine, and I am all thine. Oh, that's from The Imitation of Christ. Such a good book. So much for the Christian. Now for the Persian mystic, right? She's quoting Jalulu. I can't read it in the footnotes, is too small right now in the dark. The Wisdom of East series. I'll have to see, but anyway, I can't wait. Anyway, Rumi was like this Persian mystic. While the thought of the beloved fills our hearts, all our work is to do him. Okay, here's the quote. While the thought of the beloved fills our hearts, all our work is to do him service and spend life for him. Whenever he kindles his destructive torch, myriads of lovers' souls are burnt therewith. The lovers who dwell within the sanctuary are moths burnt with the torch of the beloved's face. O heart, hasten thither, for God will shine upon you, and seem to you a sweet garden instead of a terror. He will infuse into your soul a new soul, so as to fill you like a goblet with wine. Take up your abode in his soul. Take up your abode in heaven, O bright full moon. Like the heavenly scribe, he will open your heart's book, that he may reveal mysteries unto you. Well might Hilton say that, quote, perfect love maketh God and the soul to be as if they both together were but one thing, and Tauler that the well of life is love, and he who dwelleth not in love is dead. When I love God with my will, I transform myself into him, says St. Bernard. For this is the power or virtue of love, that it maketh thee to be like unto that which thou lovest. I can't wait to be more like that which I love, more like Christ. For real, right? Not my idea of Christ. A lot of Christians try to follow their idea of Christ, right? And it's like, no, this is more like the real being of Christ that you can be one with, and the Holy Spirit will bring you into that. But here's this Sufi poet, and that's expressing it, this oneness with God. So who am I to say to each, God is the master of all of us. So God draws us all in our own ways. That's why I always say I welcome all people here. These, nevertheless, so when I love God with my will, I transform myself into him, says St. Bernard. For this is the power or virtue of love, that it maketh thee to be like unto that which thou lovest. These, nevertheless, are objective and didactic utterances. Though their substance probably is personal, their form is not. But if we want to see what it really means to be in love with the Absolute, how intensely actual to the mystic is the object of his passion, how far removed from the sphere of pious duty or the philosophic speculation, how concrete, positive, and dominant such a passion may be, we must study the literature of autobiography, not that of poetry or exhortation. I choose for this purpose, rather than the well-known self-analysis of St. Augustine, St. Teresa, or Suso, which are accessible to everyone. I wish more people would read them, but the more private confessions of that remarkable and neglected mystic, Dame Gertrude Moore, contained in her, quote, spiritual exercises. This nun, great-great-granddaughter of Sir Thomas More, wow, and favorite pupil of the celebrated Benedictine contemplative, the V-E-N, the Venerable, I was like, what? It's a period, so I thought it was the end. The Venerable Augustine Baker, exhibits the romantic and personal side of mysticism far more perfectly than even St. Teresa, wow, whose works were composed for her daughter's edification. Wow. She was an eager student of St. Augustine. My dearie saint. My dear, she just spells it D-E-E-R-E. My dear saint, as she calls him more than once. So she studied St. Augustine. Anyway, she was a nun just like St. Teresa of Avila, whose works for her daughters or her sisters, like she was a mother to them in a way. So anyway, he has evidently influenced her language, but her passion is her own. So we're going to read from her. Remember that Gertrude Moore's confessions represent the most secret conversations of her soul with God. So be in veneration and honor for these. I love how Father Timothy Gallagher is like, pause and know that these are deep utterances. They didn't come from just, I was just skating along. No, this is from being a pioneer for a long time on these, unless God grants it to someone sooner than that. They were not meant for publication, but written for the most part on blank leaves in her breviary, were discovered and published after her death. She called them, says the title page, with touching simplicity, Amor Ordinem Nascit, an idiot's devotions. Wow. Her only spiritual father and director, Father Baker, styled them Confessions Amantis, a lover's confessions. Amans deum anima sub Deo despicit universa, a soul that loveth God, despiseth all things that be inferior unto God. A soul that loveth God, despiseth all things that be inferior unto God. The spirit of her little book is summed up in two epigrams of which her contemporary Crashaw might have been proud. Quote, to give all for love is a most sweet bargain, right? Oh, let me love or not live. Surely a nobler concept of the devoirs, D-E-V-O-I-R-S, of spiritual chivalry than St. Teresa's more celebrated and uncompromising alternative, aut pati aut mori. Love, indeed, was her life. She writes of it with a rapture which recalls at one moment St. Francis de Sales, at another the love songs of the Elizabethan poets. St. Francis de Sales' book is so good. I can't remember what it's called. It's on my phone. Or I'd look it up because I'm recording with it right now. Okay, quote, never was there or can there be imagined such a love as is between an humble soul and thee. Who can express what passeth between such a soul and thee? Verily, neither man nor angel is able to do it sufficiently. Ellipsis. In thy praise I am only happy, in which my joy I will exalt with all that love thee. For what can be a comfort while I live separated from thee, but only to remember that my God, who is more mine than I am my own, is absolutely and infinitely happy. Out of this true love between a soul and thee, there ariseth such a knowledge in the soul, that it loatheth all that is an impediment to her further proceeding in the love of thee. O love, love, even by naming thee, my soul loseth itself in thee. Ellipsis, like nothing can satiate a reasonable soul, but only thou, and having of thee, who art indeed all, nothing could be said to be wanting to her. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they shall see God. O sight to be wished, desired and longed for, because once to have seen thee is to have learnt all things. Nothing can bring us to the sight but love, to this sight but love. But what love must it be? Not a sensible love only, a childish love, a love which seeketh itself more than the beloved. No, no. But it must be an ardent love, a pure love, a prodigious love, a love of charity and humble love, and a constant love, not worn out with labors, not daunted with any difficulties. For that soul that hath set her whole love and desire on thee can never find any true satisfaction, but only in thee. That's the end of that quote. Who will not see that we have here no literary exercise, but the fruits of an experience of peculiar intensity? It answers exactly to one of the best modern definitions of mysticism as, quote, in essence, the concentration of all the forces of the soul upon a supernatural object, with a capital O, conceived and loved as a living person, end quote. Love and desire, says the same critic, are the fundamental necessities, and where they are absent, man, even though he be a visionary, cannot be called a mystic. End quote. Such a definition, of course, is not complete. It is valuable, however, because it emphasizes the fact that all true mysticism is rooted in personality and is therefore fundamentally a science of the heart. Quote, the passion which constrains the stars, quote, end quote, also constrains the starry thing, the soul, attraction, desire, and union as the fulfillment of desire. This is the way life works. In the highest and in the lowest things, the mystic's outlook, indeed, is the lover's outlook. It has the same element of wildness, the same quality of selfless and quixotic devotion, the same combination of rapture and humility. This parallel is more than a pretty fancy, for mystic and lover upon different planes are alike responding to the call of the spirit of life. The language of human passion is tepid and insignificant beside the language in which the mystic tries to tell the splendors of their love. They force upon the unprejudiced reader the conviction that they are dealing with an ardor far more burning for an object far more real. Quote, the monk can give lessons to lovers, exclaimed Arthur Symonds in astonishment of St. John of the Cross. It would be strange if he could not, since their finite passions are but the feeble images of this infinite one. So lovers only have these finite passions. Their beloved, the imperfect symbol of his first and only fair. Quote, I saw him and sought him. I had him and I wanted him, says Julian of Norwich, in a phrase which seems to sum up all the ecstasy and longing of man's soul. Only this mystic passion can lead us from our prison. Its brother, the desire of knowledge, may enlarge and improve the premise to an extent as yet undreamed of, but it can never unlock the doors. Let me see if, yeah, I'm going to have to end there. Oh, wait. There's only 3 more pages in this chapter. Let's go. Okay, number 4. I'm going to just read through, though, because I don't want these to be longer than an hour if you set aside an hour, but you can always 2 times speed these if you, or 1.5 time, whatever. If you're, if you want to listen to it in a certain amount of time. Mysticism entails a definite psychological experience. That is to say, it shows itself not merely as an attitude of mind and heart, but as a form of organic life. It is not a theory of the intellect or a hunger, however passionate, of the heart, but a definite and peculiar development of the whole self, conscious and unconscious, under the spur of such a hunger, a remaking of the whole character on high levels in the interests of the transcendental life. The mystics are emphatic in their statement that spiritual desires are useless unless they involve the movement of the whole self toward the real, with a capital R. Thus in the visions of Metzschild of Magdeburg, the soul spake thus to her divine, fare forth and see where my love is. Say to him that I desire to love. So desire speed forth, for she is quick for her nature, and came to the Epirean and cried, Great Lord, open and let me in. Then said the householder of that place, What means this fiery eagerness? Desire replied, Lord, I would have thee know that my lady can no longer bear to live. If thou wouldst flow forth to her, then might she swim. But the fish cannot long exist that is left stranded on the shore. Go back, said the Lord. I will not let thee in unless thou bring to me thy hungry soul, for it is in this alone that I take delight. End quote. We have said that the full mystic consciousness is extended in two distinct directions. So too, there are two distinct sides to the full mystical experience. I might end here. Yeah, I think I will. Two distinct sides to the full mystical experience. A, the vision or consciousness of absolute perfection, and B, the inward transmutation to which that vision compels the mystic, in order that he may be, to some extent, worthy of that which he has beheld, may take his place within the order of reality with a capital R. He has seen the perfect. He wants to be perfect too. The, quote, third term, the necessary bridge between the absolute and the self, can only, he feels, be moral and spiritual transcendence. In a word, sanctity. For, quote, the only means of attaining the absolute lies in adapting ourselves to it. The moral virtues are for him, then, the obligatory ornaments of the spiritual marriage, as Ruysbroek called them, though far more than their presence is needed to bring that marriage about. Unless this impulse for moral perfection be born in him, this travail of the inner life begun, he is no mystic, though he may well be a visionary, a prophet, a mystical poet. Anyway, so she says too, Teresa of Avila says in her book, The Interior Castle, that virtue has to go with this. Like, you can't just be virtuous and then you're a mystic, but and in order to keep coming closer and closer to the absolute, it's like alchemy. It starts burning away the other stuff. You have to let it go and you become virtuous. Or it's like, blessed are the pure in heart, for they see God. You're letting go of everything else. It's not because you're trying to be this perfect, virtuous person, but you would do anything for the absolute, for God, for divine love, because you want to be like love and you want to love truly. Anyway, there's 2 more pages, but I'm going to end there. 5.5 pages. So chapter 5 that we're going to next is called Mysticism and Theology. So right now we're ending on page 108, if you have this book, or if it's the same pages on the, I think it is. I think the ebook I found is this, because this was the cover. So it's, anyway, I wish you so much love. Share this with like-minded people, please, because I don't spend money advertising or anything like that, and I'd like to grow my channel so that more people have access to this and see this, and I just haven't spent the time more to figure out advertising and all that, because anyway, I wish you so much love.